why I can't.
Oh my God.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Marteal Lamb.
Hello, I'm with the Law Office of Marteal Lamb, obviously, and I'm here to share with you a little bit about what I do. Of course, I do contract law, but what I really love doing is bankruptcy. And, and it's, when I describe what I do, I give regular, everyday people peace of mind. I save marriages, I help people sleep at night, I file people's bankruptcies. You guys probably know that money problems is one of the top 3 marriage killers. That's one of the top 3 causes of divorce. Money problems are a major cause of stress in people's lives. You know, having creditors harass them again and again, it messes people up. It takes away their peace. And so my office is dedicated to giving people back their peace. Bankruptcy's been around for a long time. It's based on Section 1, Article 8, Clause 4 of the United States Constitution, so it's been around for a little while, about as long as the United States. And the principle of bankruptcy has actually been around for thousands of years. It's biblically based, you don't have to look it up, but it's based on Deuteronomy 15. At the end of every 7 years, there shall be a release. Every debt is wiped out for good people, for bad people, for anyone who has a debt and wants to be free. So the reason why I love bankruptcy is because it's in the intersection of justice and mercy, where the honest debtor can get a fresh start, they can get a little of that stress out of their lives, and move on and move forward. I say if Ford can do it, you know, if JCPenney can do it, I think Kmart can do it, if Donald Trump can do it many, many times, then the average American should be able to do it once in their life and just get a fresh start. So, I'm going to tell you a very abbreviated client story, who shall remain nameless. It was an older lady. She and her husband have been married for almost 30 years. They're high school sweethearts. I mean, he was the love of her life. And he died. He died in his 50s, and her life was crushed. She couldn't even go on. She could barely get up and go to work. She took several weeks off of work, not that she wanted to, but just she couldn't get it together. She could only go part-time, and the creditors were just screaming. You know, they were calling and calling and calling. The mortgage company was calling, because you can't go from, 2 incomes to 1 income without having some hardships. So what did she do? She was proud in the beginning, and she paid food bills with a credit card and just did all sorts of things, just trying to survive. And unfortunately, she paid her mortgage with their life savings. This is 20 years worth of savings she used to pay the mortgage, and she got by for about a year. And then she ran out of her life savings. And what did the mortgage company want that very next month? Money. They wanted their money. They weren't concerned that she had used her life savings trying to hold it together, trying to do the right thing. So that's a couple of months later, she came to see me. And I was able to help her. But I would have loved to be able to help her before she disposed of her life savings, doing something that didn't really help long term. So that's why I tell people, explore your options early. You don't have to file just because you come in my office. You can go over options and see what's the best for you. Because what I do when a client comes in my office, I don't tell them, okay, you stepped in the door, you got to file a bankruptcy right now. I don't do that. I go over their different options. There's debt negotiation, there's debt settlement, there's working with a credit restoration company. I'll do some debt negotiation if necessary, to try and help the person, get through it. Their income options. Sometimes people can take a little bit of money out of the cash value of their life insurance and still have enough payout to cover. Sometimes they can, there's a lot of options that I go over. And when a client comes in, I give them every single option I can think of, before we talk about the bankruptcy. Because I have more than enough business. I don't need to force people to file. And it's an emotional thing. My usual consultation time is about 90 minutes. The first time, because people have to tell me their story. People tell me about, unemployment. People tell me about medical disability. People tell me about getting fired wrongfully or not. They tell me about spouses, about children, their children dying. These are the things that I hear. And I have a box of tissues in my office. And they are used a little bit, sometimes a lot. And that's okay. So after they finish telling their story, what I do is what's called the means test to determine what type of bankruptcy they're eligible for. There's Chapter 7, Chapter 13, Chapter 11. There are several types that can be filed. Normally it's either 7 or 13, and that's the paperwork you have in front of you, is the Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 comparison. Because I don't force people to file a specific type of bankruptcy. We go through and I explain to them the options. I explain to them, what a Chapter 7 is, what a Chapter 13 is. What are the benefits, what are the drawbacks of Chapter 7, what are the benefits and drawbacks of Chapter 13, what would work best for their situation. Because, for example, if somebody has decent income, but they're just upside down on their mortgage, on their first mortgage, and they've got a second, then it may be better to do a Chapter 13. Because in Chapter 13, you can do a lien strip where you treat the second mortgage, which is wholly unsecured, based on the value of the house. You can treat that as unsecured, and you can get that worked out and save a lot of money that way. But it might, Chapter 7 might be good for someone who has, just barely scraping by, got a lot of debt, a lot of credit card debt, MasterCard and Visa just drive them crazy. If they've got a garnishment pending, with the bankruptcy, I can stop that garnishment and, get them back on the right track. So it's really quite a benefit. I try to give people their choices. When they decide, then I go over, if you want to turn 2 pages, the second page is blank for notes. You can write Marteal is awesome on those notes if you like. It's okay. I pass around pens. All right, so I lay out to them the exact bankruptcy process. This is the basics right here. It's 3 pages. What I like to do is make the bankruptcy process, which can be a stressful process, as surprise-free as possible. I want their bankruptcy to be a dull, boring experience where they're like, Marteal, you told me that was going to happen 50 times. I know. I send them videos of the creditors meeting they have to attend. I give them the paperwork so they can go over everything step by step. As they come in my office, I say, okay, we're in step 2. Now we're going to go to step 3. You're going to get a letter in the mail from the bankruptcy trustee. Here's a copy of the letter in advance so that everyone knows what's going on beforehand. So my clients hardly ever get any surprises because it's already stressful enough. I want them to know what's coming. And I work with them through the whole process. So just very, very brief. I'm not going to go through all 3 pages. Basically, there's an initial consultation. If they decide to have me represent them, we started with the paperwork. Once their documentation is filled out, we have a signature appointment. That's a long appointment because we go through the bankruptcy petition, which is sometimes 60 pages, page by page, and make sure everything is correct. And I sit right there with them and go over it with them. Once it's filed, once they finish that and they sign and say everything's okay under penalty of perjury, then I go ahead and get it filed. The filing process can take place within 1 to 24 hours. Sometimes I give them a little longer if they want. Once I get it filed, the bankruptcy stay comes into operation. That is a federal court order preventing any collection proceedings. Garnishments have to come to a halt. Any sort of proceedings, any collection proceedings have to come to a halt. So it's very powerful, and it gives people a lot of peace of mind. I tell people, creditors can, after the bankruptcy stay comes into operation, they get their case number. I tell them creditors cannot contact you, not by phone, not by mail, not by carrier pigeon, not by smoke signals, nothing. And if the creditor tries to contact them, they call me. They have my cell phone number, and I will deal with it. So that's a very powerful part of the process. Then they have, the trustees gets assigned. There's a possible phone conference. The trustee requests documents. There's one court hearing that everybody has to go to. I send my clients a video of that hearing so they can go through with it. If they want to do what I call dry run at no additional charge, when they come to my office, we drive down to the courthouse, we go find a parking space, we go through security together, we go to the actual room together, the hearing room, we sit in the chairs. I make a list of all the questions the trustee asks, and I give it to the client weeks before the hearing. They can sleep with it under their pillow, we can go over it, they can memorize it, whatever they gotta do. So we can sit in the actual chairs, go over the actual questions, so that there's no surprises. That's my whole philosophy. Now, if there are debated assets, if they've got a Van Gogh they didn't tell me about, then there are hearing procedures, and I go through that on page 2. Then, on page 3, they're going to get their discharge just initially. That means they're no longer legally responsible for the debts that were declared in the bankruptcy, and that's a great time period. I tell them at that point, exhale, relax, you've got your discharge. If you don't mess anything up, you're good to go. But there is a waiting period while the trustee submits their report to the U.S. trustee. The U.S. trustee works under the Department of Justice. They submit their report to the bankruptcy court. The assets are administered. If there's any debated assets, any creditor or debtor payments to be made, that's when they're made, and that's when the case closes. And so, most of my clients receive credit card offers within days of the case closing. Yes, they do.
Yes.
Now, the interest rate sucks, but they just filed bankruptcy. And you know, creditors, they pretend that they hate bankruptcy. Oh, that's so evil. They love post-bankruptcy clients because post-bankruptcy clients can't file bankruptcy again for 8 years. So they're gonna get their money the second time around. Also, creditors, there's some things the creditors consider favorably post-bankruptcy. For example, your debt-to-income ratio goes up because you've got less debt with the same amount of income. And also your ability, your disposable income, the income you've got left over to pay bills, it goes up, as well as your ability to save. And that's why I send my clients a financial video, and there's financial courses. I recommend working with someone. I have a financial planner that I'll recommend to. You know, I have a male one and a female one just in case. And I recommend them to get started on the right foot. So that's sort of the very basic bankruptcy process, and that's my philosophy of bankruptcy, just helping people, you know, and it's just my joy to take that refrigerator off people's shoulders, you know, to give them a second chance. Who in life doesn't need a second chance? So it makes me very happy to do it. I'll do it to the day I die. It's so merciful, and it gives people such relief. And I do have a low money down payment program that people can file bankruptcy. You know, they can get it filed and get that powerful bankruptcy stay in operation for less than $200. And there is a payment plan afterwards, you know, but they can get some relief right away. So if there's no questions, well, I'll do questions. A good referral for me would be someone who works for Wells Fargo. I accept their legal insurance. Wells Fargo, Johnson & Johnson, I accept their legal insurance, or Visicon. Also City of Jacksonville, City of Mesa. There's a legal insurance, and I accept that insurance. So they can file for almost nothing. It's ridiculous. That's it. Does anybody have any questions?
I got a stupid question.
No question is stupid, except for, you know, what's your name? Marteal.
Well, my ex is thinking about filing bankruptcy. He's starting to think about it. And I've gone through bankruptcy, so he's asking me a few questions, and I started also thinking, it's like, well, you're married. Doesn't your spouse also get dragged into the bankruptcy if you file bankruptcy? You can't file bankruptcy separately, can you?
You can, but the income that's used to determine whether or not you're eligible for a Chapter 7, Chapter 13, et cetera, is based on a household income. That's a heads-on-bed standard. So if they're in the household, if there's household income, it all has to be declared.
Well,
But then the spouse isn't included as far as the discharge, and to some extent as far as the credit hits. So bankruptcy is a credit hit, but it won't hit the other spouse because they're a non-filing spouse. Now the joint debt will be affected, but not any separate
what about assets though?
assets.
Like, if you have $1 million in the bank, can they take your partner's $1 million to pay your debt?
Well, unfortunately, Arizona is a community property state, so it gets a little bit complicated. That sort of falls into legal advice, and I'm trying to have them call me
Yeah.
So we can go over the specifics, because I don't wanna, go give a bunch of legal advice on tape and everything. That's just.
So, yeah, and there is an interesting interplay between family law and bankruptcy,
is.
because
I love
that
family law
bankruptcy
attorneys.
stay also affects your family law proceedings.
Mhm.
And so I don't do bankruptcy. I will never do bankruptcy, because
That's okay.
it's like poke my eye out bad for me. But I will have,
You have that.
right? So
That's fine.
that and taxes, I hate
Bring it
both.
on.
So I will sometimes work with a bankruptcy attorney to figure out whether they should file separately, jointly, whether they should file for divorce first, whether they don't. And sometimes even if they file post-divorce, it has family law implications, which then we have to
It
go
does.
back and force in
It does.
family court.
And I'll tell you, it's a sad thing that, you probably can testify to this. Sometimes one spouse, I'm not gonna name the sex of the spouse, but I think you know, will make, will make arrangements and do a settlement with, oh, I'll take the credit card debt in exchange for, whatever. And then that spouse, who seemed to be so generous, as soon as the divorce is over, they file a bankruptcy and they get their credit card debt discharged, and the other spouse is responsible for whatever they agreed to.
Right,
Yeah.
which then you have
It's
to go
so
back
sad.
and enforce in family court, go like,
Yeah.
no. The creditor can come after my client,
Right.
because I never do the other way.
Mhm.
I'm like, the credit card company can come after my
Can I
client,
real
but then
quick do a
I,
wrap up for the tape
Yeah.
real fast? Again, this is Marteal Lamb. Please feel free to visit my law office. Also, I have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Marteal Lamb or Marteal Law. Thank you.